Strange Shadows, a Carcash and Smith podcast.
It was late summer and the Georgetown road was deep with dust which had settled like a dun pall on the bordering chaparral and pines. Since he had walked all the way from Auburn without securing a single lift, the man who was trudging along the road with the broiling afternoon sun on his back was hardly less dusty than the trees. He paused now and then to mop his face with a discolored handkerchief, or to peer rather wistfully at the occasional cars which passed him without offering to stop. His clothing, though not actually ragged, was old and worn, and had the indescribable shapelessness of clothing that had been slept in. He was very thin, stoop-shouldered, and discouraged-looking. His general aspect was almost that of a professional tramp, and the people of the countryside were suspicious of tramps.
Hello friends, and welcome to Season 1, Episode 5 of Strange Shadows. The voice you just heard was Jeff Goad of the Appendix podcast, and he was reading the opening paragraph of The Phantoms of the Fire, which is the first story we're going to be covering today. I'm one of your hosts, Rob Poynton.
And I'm the other one, Tim Mendes. Yeah, so we're going to be covering two stories today, the first of which, as Rob just mentioned, is The Phantoms of the Fire. The typescript held at the John Hay Library dates it as being completed on October the 7th in 1929. It was published in the September 1930 issue of Weird Tales, and Smith was paid a handsome sum of $20 for it.
That's not bad, considering this is a very short story, actually, isn't it? This one, it's just a few pages.
Yeah, it's pretty much what we'd call flash fiction nowadays, I reckon.
Yeah. It
can't be much more than 1,500 words or something, can it?
No, absolutely.
So, yeah. So that's not bad at all, really, $20.
And I suppose this was more up Wright's alley, so to speak, this kind of story. This is more very conventional Weird Tales type story, I guess we'd call it.
Yeah, it's interesting, because Ramsey Campbell actually comments that might Smith have found it politic to woo Weird Tales, more specifically Farnsworth Wright, with material less immediately imaginative than his earlier work? Certainly, The Phantoms of the Fire reads as if he had tamped his fancy down, which failed to satisfy him even if it sold the tale.
Yeah, and Smith even said to Lovecraft that this story was no favourite with me. I prefer nearly all my other tales. And I think we have to agree, this is the only Smith story I've read so far, and I haven't by no means read all of them, but quite a lot of them. And this is the only one that sort of left me meh, and a little bit disturbed as well, I have to say, in some ways, but we'll get onto that.
I don't know, I kind of like it for what it is. I mean, it's no means anywhere near his other stuff. It's like even the language, it's like he's dialed it right back.
Yeah.
It's like, so I couldn't find a word in this one.
Okay, as you mentioned that, I only found one word, well, not one word that I liked, but the word that stood out the most for me was runnelled.
Oh, nice, yeah.
So, yeah, the line for that is, the dust on Jonas's cheeks was runnelled with sweat, which he no longer paused to wipe away. So, obviously, a runnel is like where water runs down something and leaves the mark. Just a nice sounding word.
Yeah, it's like what I get in my eyeliner when it's really hot in clubs. Runnels of eyeliner.
Oh, the perils of being a goth.
Yeah, isn't it?
And we were just saying, especially in this heat, we're both locked away inside on a boiling hot day.
Yeah.
If we go out into the sun, we burst into flames.
That's exactly it. That's precisely it. 2 minutes and I turned bright red. Yeah, I couldn't find a favourite word, but I did find a good insult.
Huh?
Well, because he describes the figure that appears at the end as a dilapidated buzzard.
Oh, that's nice.
Which I thought was like, that's a good one. Yeah. I like that.
Yeah, you can picture that, can't you? Very vivid. So, as I said, it's a very short story, and the plot is basically our protagonist, who, as we hear from his description at the start there, is obviously very down on his luck. He's thin, he's malnourished. Mm-hmm. He looks like a tramp, basically. And he's returning home after an absence of some years he had a big argument with his wife, I think shrewish, I believe she's described at one point.
Yeah, shrewish.
And he walked out on her and the 3 kids, since which time he's wandered around doing a variety of dead-end jobs and he's decided to return. So that's the scene that is set.
Yeah. You get the impression he's that kind of... Because it's obviously set in Auburn, isn't it? California, so it's where he knows. And you always... you've got that hobo culture in California, haven't you? Of the guys that ride up and down the rails doing like grape picking and all that kind of stuff, don't you?
Yeah. I never thought of that. Yeah, I mean, I was sort of thinking of the Great Depression, but that might have hit about this time, or did it start?
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
I think, you had that sort of culture in California already, didn't you?
Yeah, the vagrancy of they get on the trains and just ride to different places and go and work in farm labouring, that kind of stuff. And
wasn't California also the place where the Hells Angels started? I mean, that would have been sort of post-World War II, I guess.
Yes, yeah.
Almost that same idea of nomadic existence, I guess.
Yeah, well, I think you get that in California in general, because, I mean, you got it with the hippies as well, didn't you? Like, there was all these nomadic tribes almost, like your Manson family and your Moonies and all these kind of guys. It's just sort of travelling around in buses, you know. I guess there must be something to do with the area, because obviously you've got all the mountains and the arid landscape and that. It must just lend well to wandering.
I suppose it's that and that bohemian lifestyle, isn't it? Of course, that's the start of the hippie movement in San Francisco. And prior to that, you had the beatniks.
Oh, yeah.
Was it Carmel, I think, was a place where a lot of them gathered?
Yeah.
There were all these little enclaves of artists and creative people. And, of course, as we said, this is an area that Smith is very familiar with, and I just wanted to mention, this is from the Stephen Berens book. When Clark was 9, they moved some 6 miles to a 39-acre spread on Boulder Ridge, 2 miles outside the small town of Auburn. Father and son together built the family cabin, and obviously the central focus in this story is the cabin. Smith described the site as a rather arid volcanic hilltop, whose best feature is the wide and elevated view, since on the west we see a long stretch of the Sacramento Valley and the Coast Range Mountains, and on the east the higher foothills, topped by more than 100 miles of snowy Sierran peaks. And we certainly get a sense of that in this story, though this is tempered with this desolation and destruction, which really, to me, it echoed Yondo again, or the 13th Skeleton.
Yeah, it's his thing of desolation, of things going to ruin. But in this case, like, going up in flames, pretty much, isn't it?
Which is a unfortunately regular event in that area, by all accounts.
Yeah, it is.
And I think we've been looking for, we're trying to track this down. There was a letter from Smith to Genevieve Sully, who we spoke about previously.
Yep.
Dated July the 19th, 1931, where he vividly describes one of these bushfires that raged through the area. And, of course, these, they're occurring even more now with the climate change issues. I think there was a big one last year, certainly.
Yeah, there was, which one of the, quite infamously, a politician tried to blame on Jewish space lasers.
Oh. I mean, do you just look at America at the moment and think, what the fuck is going on? I mean, I know we've got our problems here in the UK, but...
No. Well, one of them's just gone, hasn't it?
Oh, yeah. Well, he's clinging on. He's like a stubborn...
Yeah,
he's like a stubborn one that won't flush away, isn't he? But,
yeah, he's like your typical wee beige jobby floater in the, as Billy Connolly would say.
So, this is a big issue in that area, and Smith obviously had first-hand knowledge of this. And that comes across in the writing. It's not Smith's most eloquent prose,
no,
but it does the job.
Oh,
I mean, he, even on a day off, right, he could knock out something that is way above what most other people.
Well, this is it. This is kind of what I was thinking when I was reading it. It was like, this is like him dialed all the way back, but it's still like more vivid than I can ever do.
So our protagonist is a man named Jonas McGillicuddy.
Yeah.
Which I wondered if that was a real name, but I looked it up, and it is actually an Irish name, and it's a well-known sort of name. And we get the idea that he's left after the perennial nagging of his frail, sensitive nerves, and I thought this was nice, sorely disappointed wife. So that it's
tells
Smith's
you all you need to know, I think.
gift. Yeah. A few words, but you've got the whole marriage there, haven't you?
Yeah. He was a bit crap. He was too busy down the pub when he should have been looking after the kids. You get it.
Yeah.
You get it.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like a happy relationship.
No, not at all.
And after a quarrel of more than customary bitterness and acerbity, he decided to leave. That was it.
Yeah, so then obviously he'd been wandering around for ages, hasn't he? So a man of shifting, unstable temperament is what he said about him. And eventually he'd started to think about returning. And he said that time had softened his memory of his wife's undependable temper, of her shrewish outbursts, but he had not forgotten her motherly ways when she was in more tractable humour, nor her excellent cooking.
Yeah, I like this. I mean,
like it. Yeah.
It's nice and homely, isn't it? He even says, "Gosh, but one of Matilda's pear pies will taste good." You know,
yeah.
It's a nice little bit of domestic happiness amongst all the bitterness, I suppose.
Yeah,
that's been going. In fact, he thinks of it as so much that his mouth starts to water as well.
Yeah.
And he doesn't really think beyond that. He says he was not reflective enough to wonder what his reception would be beyond an uneasy surmise that Matilda might give him a scolding.
Yeah.
So maybe she'll be glad to see me. So he disappears. He's just going to rock up after 3 years.
Yeah.
And expect to be greeted with warmth and happiness.
Yeah.
And then he tries to picture his children, the 5-year-old boy and the babies, the girl babies of 3 and 2. Guess they'll have forgotten they had a puppa. So there's this tinge of sadness in it as well.
Yeah, you get that all the way through. That this is kind of a broken man, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's he's kind of for whatever reason, he's kind of ditched his life and gone off into the wilderness, and he's kind of a shell of his former self, isn't he?
And he's come back to an even worse wilderness, right? Because now this is totally barren, not only physically but emotionally as well. And we get this hugely sad and ironic piece about the pines that screened the cabin.
Yeah.
About how he wanted to cut them down because he thought they were dangerous, but his wife thought they looked very nice and pretty and attractive, so she forbade him to cut them down.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is a major factor in what happens to them later.
Indeed. On. Yeah, I like the way he's sort of walking through, and it's a wind, isn't it, that blows the unmistakable acrid odour of burnt grass and trees. So yeah, you just get that kind of knot in the stomach going there, don't you?
Yes.
It's just like, no, this isn't good. Yeah.
But then he comes through this fire and he sees wreathing smoke arising from the chimney of his cabin, so everything seems fine at first.
Yeah.
And the sun had almost touched the horizon as he climbed the winding road through the orchard and entered the grove above. Isles of light perceptibly tinged with gold lay between the elongated shadows. Again, we almost go back into a very pleasant, bucolic scene.
Yeah.
He's come out of the devastation into this, and hope rises.
Yeah, it's almost like the rose-tinted glasses moment, isn't it? It's nice. It's interesting.
And he actually sees the cabin, right? And he sees a woman in calico standing with 2 little girls beside her. Almost like they're there waiting for him, although there's no sign of the boy.
Yeah, no, I wondered whereabouts of the boy, and he mused maybe he's sick again. So yeah, he was a fragile youngster. Apparently, was the boy.
Yeah. I was just wondering if the boy was Smith here, because we know he was fragile.
Yeah.
He had poor health, possibly agoraphobia, and he had some sort of breakdown in his younger years, you know.
Oh, that's interesting, yeah, because you said, obviously, you were saying that he built the cabin with his dad and that, so maybe that is, like, yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that, yeah. Yeah. I love this line here. He was very glad to be home, but he felt a little doubtful, a trifle tremulous as to the greeting he would receive from Matilda. I could imagine if that had been, like, from the Northern English standpoint, guy rocked up after 3 years. He'd get a clap round the ear with a rolling pin.
Never mind 3 years. Have you ever been 20 minutes?
Yeah, oh God, yeah. Rolled up newspaper, wallop.
Or just the silent treatment. You know, when you come in the house and it's just quiet like a tomb.
Oh God, yeah.
And this was nice as well. It's like she's shading her eyes, almost watching for him. And he tries to call out, "Hello, Matilda," but his throat is dry and dusty, so the words are no more than a hoarse whisper. And I sort of imagined, obviously, he's come through all this dust and smoke and everything else, but is this like an emotional response as well?
Yeah.
He can't get the words out. Yeah. And that's when it all goes wrong. Because we get this huge roaring sheet of ruddy flame that just overwhelms him. A blast of intolerable heat, fierce as the breath of 1,000 furnaces, blew in Jonas's face and swept him backwards like a hurricane. And off he goes into pitch-black gulfs of unconsciousness.
Yeah.
In good Lovecraftian fashion, of course.
Yes, yeah.
We do like a pitch-black gulf.
Don't we all? Yeah. I like this bit where he awakes, because it was a day when he awoke after he'd been knocked over by this wall of flame kind of thing. And there's confusions going, and he mentions that the light was slanting through the treetops from a different direction, and that there was more of it that seemed normal in an evergreen forest. I like that kind of, it's uncanny valley stuff. I love that kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's a very subtle detail as well, isn't it? Because all the foliage has been burnt away, so the light would be different. So it kind of works on both those levels again, doesn't it? Yeah,
exactly. And to somebody who's been there all his life, he's going to know what the light looks like.
Yeah.
At each time of the day, because you just get used to it, and you don't. So when there is some kind of difference, no matter how small, you are going to notice it, aren't you?
Yeah, well, we just had nothing as tragic as this story, but we had new windows put in about 2 months ago. And obviously they're the same size windows, but they're of a different design and layout and everything else.
Right.
And it's like every time we were going into a room, it was like, oh, isn't it light in here? It's like having a black and white telly and you suddenly get a colour one.
They are right, yeah.
A small difference, and yet...
I get it on the very, very rare occurrence, like every 5 years when the people come and clean the windows. Because I live on a tower block, right? So you can't just get outside and wash the window. You got to get one of them things that goes up the side of the building to do it. And then it's just like, oh, there's light in here. Yeah.
So this is where we get the neighbour turns up.
Yep.
The, what is it? The
dilapidated buzzard. Yeah.
Now, I think you're going to be with me on this one. Jonas recognised him as Samuel Slocum. Now, what did you think of when you heard the name Slocum?
Slocum, yeah.
Are you being served? Right.
Yeah, Mrs. Slocum.
For anyone who doesn't know, we're not going to go into details, but just look up "Are you being served?" and Mrs. Slocum and her catchphrase.
Yes, her catchphrase.
Yeah.
Her feline friend, let's say.
Her feline friend. Yeah. So Samuel Slocum says, "Oh well, you've come back."
Bit bloody late. Yeah,
you're a little late. Everything burnt up clean the day before yesterday. And Jonas explains he saw the cabin last night. He saw Matilda and the girls. Then there was this burst of flame. And Slocum just says, you're crazy.
Yeah, you're a nutcase. Yeah, I love that. I love it. No preamble. You're crazy, Jonas.
Blunt and to the point. And then this is the bit that really thought, oh, this is, they was all burnt up along with the rest of the country hereabouts. We heard your wife and babies are screaming, but the fire was all around. The trees fell across the road and no one could get in and no one could get out. I told you, Jonas, to cut them pines down.
Yeah.
So it's a very vivid moment, isn't it? That where you to be hearing that kind of thing is awful.
Well, I like the actual final line, because it just takes tragedy and adds another cherry of tragedy right on top of it.
Yeah.
Because he says, so Jonas says, my folks was all burnt up. And he goes, well, your little boy died a year ago, so there was just Matilda and the two girls.
Yeah. Again, he's just matter-of-fact delivery, isn't it? He doesn't try to break this news gently. Oh, no, your boy died a year ago.
Yeah. It's like, well, how I kick him when he's down, you know?
Yeah.
Stick the boot in.
And that's it. That's the end. It's, it's kind of a short and quite blunt story in that respect.
Yeah. I quite like it. It actually reminds me of quite a lot of Ambrose Bierce's stuff.
Yes. Yeah.
It's very similar to a lot of his things, like Occurrence at Owl Creek bridge and things like that. It's an almost Bayesian, if that's a word, story. Yeah.
And it also has a little bit of the ring of the sort of Robert E. Howard Western stories as well. I guess because we're dealing with a similar type of person, perhaps.
Yeah.
The rural characters.
Yes.
And he certainly had very much that, although I guess they were set in Texas, so a different accent, but very much that same manner. I mean, that's the same across the board, right? You know,
of course, yeah.
Just blunt.
It's the same as our
people.
same as our rustics and you know what we would call bumpkins. You know, it's the same, isn't it? You know, your Wurzels down in the southwest and all that. You know, it's the same kind of thing across the board. Yeah.
I've got a friend from Yorkshire who's the most blunt-speaking person I've ever met.
That's Yorkshire for you, isn't it?
Yeah, and some of the things he says, no, you can't say that, but he just did. He seems to get away with it.
Yeah.
One of my favourites of his expressions is someone once said to him, "Where were you born?" And he said, "Yorkshire."
Yeah.
You know, in that proud kind of way. And the person said, "Oh, which part?" He said, "Fucking all of me." I thought it was great.
Oh God, that's brilliant, isn't it? Yeah. The best one I ever heard was it was from a mate of my granddad's. It was like, "I'd rather eat Yorkshire manure than southern vegetables." It's like, for fuck's sake, guy.
Yes. The north-south divide is still a thing in England. I guess that's the same in most places as well. That it's that urban-rural divide, isn't it? I mean, that's the same in everywhere you go.
Yeah.
You get that. Okay, so that's The Phantoms of the Fire. Very short story. As Smith even said, not one of his best, but it's still Smith. It still counts for something.
Lovecraft was more keen on it, wasn't he?
Yeah. Well, he did mention. Actually, I'll mention this now because we do have a letter from Lovecraft to Smith.
Right.
And this is dated October the 29th, 1929. I have just read A Night in Malneant with the greatest interest and admiration, and that's the story we're going to be covering in a second. And must thank you for the manuscript, which I shall retain in my principal archives. I love the thought that Lovecraft had principal archives. Presumably he had like secondary archives and maybe even tertiary.
Tertiary.
I wonder what happened to them, eh?
Oh, yeah.
And about Malneant, he says, it has the true dream quality in a phenomenally great degree and seems full of the subtle Poe Dunzani element, which I vainly seek in most weird writing. You certainly excel in whatever medium you adopt, and I feel sure that fantastic fiction will gain much if you decide to make it your speciality for a period, or specialty, actually. As a particular admirer of such material, I earnestly hope that you will. Glad to hear that the last incantation landed, and hope the end of the story, the metamorphosis of the world, and A Night in Malneant, and the Phantoms of the Fire may do likewise. As for the latter, I rather like local colour myself, and think it often adds substance and very similitude to plots which would seem very thin and unconvincing without it.
Yeah.
So basically what we said, it's not much of a plot, but once again, the description is so vivid, it makes it more than it is in a sense.
Yeah. So, it's interesting because, like you say, that Smith wasn't very keen on fire, but he seems like he really likes this one. Which is something that I'm going to get into a little bit here. Because A Night in Malneant had something of a tumultuous publication history. It was completed on the 15th of October in 1929. He sent it to Farnsworth Wright, and it was rejected.
Of course.
Yeah, I've got... yeah, but the rejection letter he got from Farnsworth Wright was, I was rather charmed by this story. The plot thread is too slight, and I fear that would not go over well with our readers. I may underestimate the artistic appreciation of our readers, but I think not. It's like...
Well, that's typical Wright again, isn't it? Which he seems to have said for virtually... I don't know what the percentages of hits and rejects for Weird Tales, but most of them certainly seem to be along those lines. Not enough plot and too clever and too well written.
Yes, that seems to be it. It's too good. It seems to be But Smith revised it several times. He first sent it to Harry Bates at Astounding Stories in September 31, and then a guy called Carl Swanson, who I've tried to look up, but I can't find much about him. But he was trying to get a new pulp journal off the ground. It was going to be like, like your paperbacks type thing.
Oh yeah.
He was trying to get that off the ground, and he'd said, "Yeah, I'll take it," and then it all imploded and fell apart.
Oh right.
So that never came to light. And then he sent the revised version of it back to Farnsworth Wright, and he said he'd lightened several paragraphs and sentences which contributed nothing to the overall story, but it got rejected again. Twice.
Right.
And then we go, on the 23rd of July 1932, August Derleth wrote to Smith that HPL had informed him that A Night in Malneant had been picked up by Trend magazine. And Derleth was so happy about this and so pleased about this that he even sent them a letter to compliment them on taking the story.
Wow.
But they hadn't taken the story at all. Lovecraft was wrong.
No,
yeah.
Lovecraft made a boo-boo.
Yeah. Unfortunately, HPL was mistaken, and it had in fact been rejected. In a follow-up letter, Smith said, you can tell he's a bit cheesed off by this whole situation. Not with the Lovecraft thing, but the rejection. And so I'm just going to read you this here. This bit from this letter dated August the 2nd, 32. HPL seems to have been misinformed about their acceptance of my tale, A Night in Malneant. It wasn't modern enough, in quotes, whatever that means, for Kerr. I sent it to Pagney, which will no doubt make the same objection. Unanimity of prejudices among the highbrows against anything that doesn't deal intensively with present-day life is really quite remarkable. I'll assent readily enough to their demand that literature should treat of life, but I think their definition of what constitutes life is absurdly narrow and preposterously limited. The past and future and the whole imaginative universe are just as much part of life as the doings of 20th century America. Hear, hear. Yeah.
Wow. Well, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think, one thing with this story is it's timeless anyway. It's It could be anywhere, any time. It has a timeless, dreamlike quality to it. But I wonder if the name of the magazine is the clue, if that was sent to Trend.
Yes.
Then, 1931 was it, or thereabouts? What was on Trend then? That's probably what they want stories about people driving cars
with the hand crank. Yeah.
Listening to radiograms.
Yeah.
That new Buster Keaton film or something.
It's from this point on in the letters with Derleth that he starts talking about self-publishing a chapbook with 4 or 5 stories, one of which is A Night in Malneant, and that was eventually released as The Double Shadow and Other Fantasies in 1933.
Ah, right.
Yeah.
Cool.
Something that made HBL very, very happy. Yeah, so here we go. It's a letter from 24th of February 1933. Congratulations on the printing arrangement. The booklet will certainly be a winner, and I fancy every member of our group will want a copy. It is full of especial favourites of mine, such as A Night in Malneant. Put me down for a copy, and if I feel flush, I may order another for a lending copy.
Oh, that's nice.
So there you go. Yeah, a man who doesn't have any cash, he's...
he's so supportive of his friends and his colleagues and his contemporaries.
Exactly. Eventually, it was eventually published in Weird Tales.
Oh, really? Oh.
Yeah, it was edited again, was finally published in Weird Tales in September 1939.
Wow.
So he got it in there in the end.
Eventually. I wonder if that was a case of his other stories were so good, people started demanding more Smith, perhaps.
Yes, probably.
And Wright was proven wrong.
Yeah. Nice.
It should be Farnsworth.
See what you did there. Nice.
Farnsworth wrong.
Farnsworth wrong. Yeah.
There's a good spoof for character, but yeah, it's it is a shame. It must have been so frustrating. Yeah. And I think if it had been there's the irony. The previous story, he kind of knocks that off quick, and
yeah, he wouldn't have really cared.
and that he gets paid for. But then something he's really proud of, and obviously there's craft and work gone into it, gets rejected so many times, and then eventually accepted for no apparent reason.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, isn't it? And it's clear from obviously from Lovecraft what he said about it and what Derleth said about it. They both thought it was awesome.
Yeah.
They both really liked it.
And it is.
Smith,
I mean,
yeah, it is. It really
this is extremely atmospheric story. And again, I mean, I suppose you can sympathise with Wright in that sense. Plot-wise, it's a man coming into a town. He's been wandering for years trying to get over the death of his soulmate, and he finds this funeral going on, and it's his dead lover that they're mourning. That's basically the outline of the plot, I suppose.
Pretty much, yeah.
But yet, what he does with that is quite fantastic, I guess.
Indeed, yeah. Yeah, I love the atmosphere to this one. It's like all of the Averone stuff. Averoin, sorry. Stuff. I struggle with that one. Yeah, it's like all of them. It's just so bloody thick with atmosphere, isn't it? You could spread it on your toast. It's that damn thick.
Yeah. And I'm just picking out words straight away like dim, dubious, vague, fog. There's lots of bells ringing through the mist and through the fog. The place is a labyrinth. He comes across a great, colossal grey bridge into this labyrinth of streets. And we're in old Europe, right? I mean, he is quite clear about that.
Yeah. And
this reminded me a little bit of the music of Eric Zahn, that same kind of town. So
yes,
I don't get the feeling of this as being Paris again. The same with Zahn. More like one of those old medieval cities.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I love the bit when he sets foot on the bridge, and it's under which the black waters flowed in stealthy division and were joined again in a silence as of Styx and Acheron. So yeah, again, this is what I'm thinking. Is this kind of a liminal place? Is this not quite in our reality? Is it on the borderland, so to speak?
I think we get a sense of that very much later on because he wanders around this place.
Yes.
But then if I just skip ahead a little bit, because when he goes into the cathedral and he sees the corpse on the bier is not only the name of Mariel, because everyone has been telling him we're here to mourn the loss of Lady Mariel, which was the name of his lover. Not only is it her name, but it is actually her lying there in state. Yet when he realises this, then he says, and now I knew with a terrible certitude that this one event, the death of the Lady Mariel, had drawn apart from all other happenings, had broken away from the sequence of time, and had found for itself a setting of appropriate gloom and solemnity, or perhaps had even built around itself the whole enormous maze of that spectral city. So this event is of such magnitude that it's created its own space outside of our normal time, outside of our normal dimension, and he has somehow accessed that space.
Well, it's Silent Hill, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's a town that configures itself around somebody's dark memory.
Right.
Or a dead, like in the second game, it's about around the protagonist's dead wife, who it turned out he murdered, but he'd repressed the memory and things like that. And that's basically that's what this is kind of like a medieval version of Silent Hill. That's how I kind of see it.
Yeah, totally. And then you wonder, is it self-created by him?
This is it.
Or is it created of itself?
Yeah.
Because presumably, I mean, other people I'm sure would have missed her, but no one else has gone wandering and sort of, you get the impression he's sort of wailing and gnashing his teeth, isn't he, and all that sort of stuff,
Yeah.
This has really destroyed him emotionally.
It's kind of like, private hell kind of thing, almost purgatory.
Yeah.
Which would tie into the thing of the Styx and Acheron and stuff like that. It's almost like his own private purgatory, which,
Well, I did wonder at one point if this was him in purgatory.
Yeah.
You know, and what you say about Silent Hill there. Well, he did, in effect, cause her death, right? So there's a huge amount of guilt, because we get at the start, she loved me with an affection that was deeper and purer and more stable than mine. And my changeable temper, my fits of cruel indifference or ferocious irritability had broken her gentle heart. So much so that she sought the anodyne of a lethal poison and was laid to rest in the sombre vaults of her ancestors.
Yeah.
So she killed herself because of him.
Yeah.
So that compounds the grief and the guilt and everything else.
This is what I mean. It does make me wonder whether the creators of Silent Hill had ever read this, because this is kind of like the nuts and bolts of it right there.
That's it. They must have done. Yeah, it sounds like too much of a coincidence.
Well, they were inspired by Lovecraft, so it would stand to reason.
So we get this lovely description of the city as he's going through it, and we didn't choose a word, did we, at the start?
Oh no, yeah.
I'll mention that now and then. Mine was obsequies.
Oh, nice. That was one of the ones I listed as well. But,
which is funeral rites, basically, and obviously comes up in context of what's happening in the cathedral.
Yeah, it's mentioned a few times, isn't it? I was like, I like that word. I might have to use that word. Now, it's interesting because the one I chose is one that I've used, but I know that not as many people as I thought are familiar with it, because I called the story Eugene Angove and the Perilous Peregrination.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it's a peregrination, which is wandering, journey. And so many people were like, what does that even mean?
It's a great word, isn't it?
Yeah,
peregrinations. I suppose people maybe associate it with Lord of the Rings, perhaps. Peregrine Took.
Yeah. Ah, that was figure, yeah.
Which, knowing Tolkien and his love of words and etymology, he obviously that was a deliberate thing.
Yeah, I'd imagine so.
Yeah, I think the Tooks were a bit of a wandering type of hobbit, weren't they? Perhaps.
Yes.
I don't know.
No, that would figure. Yeah, I could see that. Yeah. And I get it from things like P.G. Wodehouse and stuff like that. Would you care for a slight peregrination, sir? You know.
Postprandial peregrination.
That's it.
So yes, he's wandering this street. We've got the bells tolling through the fog. We've got labyrinthine streets. The sky is leaden vapours. The day was drear and sullen at best.
Yeah.
But he feels the evening must be near because the shadows and the mist start to thicken a little bit. There's no obvious sunset as such because you can't even really see the sun.
No. Along the streets from which a visible twilight issued to envelop me. I love that line. It's yeah.
And he's looking for somewhere to rest and to eat, a tavern or something.
Yep.
But there's no room at the inn, basically, is there? Everywhere he goes.
Yeah, I was going to say that is almost biblical, isn't it? It's like,
but still, this bell ringing is going on. He even describes it as a hateful pealing. It comes to annoy him. It's irritating him. And then he actually spots some people, 2 women clothed in grey that was cold as dim as the folds of fog and veiled, who were hurrying along the street with the same funereal intentness I had perceived in all other denizens of that city. That's a little bit odd, hurrying and funereal intentness.
Yeah.
Because actually I went to a funeral this week and, there's that slow walk in. It's intent.
Yes. Yeah.
But there's no hurrying about it. It's an odd juxtaposition, I think.
Yeah, it's like there is an urgency, but there's a restrained urgency, if that can even be a thing.
Yeah. I guess in a way the urgency is almost like the emotional aspect of it. People want to get this thing over. So no one wants to hang around a funeral as such. No. But there is that solemnity. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, not unless you're one of those professional mourners. Do you get them over here? Because I know you get them in the States. You get them people that can be hired to go and mourn at funerals.
Well, that's what I said to Lara. I want the full because a lot of people I know now getting to that age,
Yeah.
They have these very quiet sort of cremations or something, and it's a sort of 20-minute service. I said no, I want full East End horse-drawn hearse, black horses. I want 20 women weeping and wailing and gnashing at the front. I want men in top hats,
nice.
The works.
Yeah, that's what I want. I want them to make sure it's going to be pissing it down somehow. I don't know how they do that. Even if it's a bright sunny day, get their hose pipes out or something.
Yeah, and I want to be buried standing up as well, just to be different.
Perpendicular burial. Yeah.
And what I loved about this as well was he sort of says, can you direct me to an inn? And they scarcely pause or even turn their heads. And they sort of snap at him. We cannot tell you. We are shroud weavers. And we have been busy making a shroud for the Lady Marielle. Shroud Weavers.
I love that, lad. That'd be a great band name for a goth band, wouldn't it? The Shroud Weavers.
Yes, we didn't really get a band name last time, did we? But
No.
I don't think, but they're the Shroud Weavers. Nice.
That'd be a great one. Yeah.
And the next people he encounters are two men dressed in very much the same way.
Yeah.
And they're the Coffin Makers.
Another band. Yeah. That'd be more death rock, wouldn't it? A rockabilly, psychobilly, maybe. Yeah.
And again, it's almost like every line of this, you can pick something out, right? There's another lovely expression here. But at length, as I fought with my shadowy perplexity and my burning memories. Shadowy perplexity and burning memories. That's nice.
I like the fact that just after every encounter, the bell kicks off again. It's like as the Coffin Makers had spoken and hastened on, the bells rang out again, this time very near at hand, with a more leaden and sepulchral menace in their dismal tolling.
Nice. This is that dreamlike quality, though, isn't it? Whereas he gets nearer the central event, things become more intense. It's very film-like in that sense as well.
Yeah.
This is the background music now going from...
Yeah, definitely. It's when the cello kicks in, isn't it? But I can see what Lovecraft was saying about it. It is very reminiscent of Poe, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
It does have elements of Poe in this quite a lot.
Well, the whole dead lover thing, mate, and everything else. I mean, it's Poe all over, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the funeral trappings as well, or the funereal trappings. They talk about musicians and mourners as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's always nice to see musicians getting a gig, I have to say.
Yeah, that's why one of the hotels, one of the inns, isn't it? It's like this one's full of mourners, and then he goes to another one, and it's full of musicians.
I like how they keep the musicians apart from everyone, from normal, decent people.
From normal, decent folks, yeah.
I do hope they got a crack at the buffet, though.
Oh, definitely.
And he finally discovers the source of the bells, which is the spires of the great cathedral which loomed immediately before me through the fog.
Yeah.
You can really see this. If you've ever been in London during the fog or somewhere like York, perhaps, or those kind of Lincoln.
Yeah.
Anywhere where you've still got that slightly medieval feel. And you get that sometimes, that wonderful... it's not a total concealment, but sometimes it's almost like the bottoms of the buildings are hidden and the tops, you get like the dome of St. Paul's floating above you sort of thing.
Yeah, Exeter. When I lived in Exeter, because it was, it's on the top of the hill with the River Exe leading out to the sea just below it. So you used to get these ridiculous fogs and mists like rolling in, and walking through like the cathedral precincts in the morning when you got that, it was incredibly dreamlike and eerie. And and you just got like the tops of tombstones sticking out of the of the fog and stuff. It was like, it was great. I used to love that.
And then I thought this was really interesting because he sees this figure on the bier. He's not quite sure who it is yet.
Mm-hmm.
And he becomes dimly aware that someone is at his elbow. But without taking his eyes off of the bier, he asks, who is it that lies yonder, for whom these masses are being said and the bells are rung? And a slow, sepulchral voice replied, it is the Lady Marielle who died yesterday and who will be interred tomorrow in the vaults of her ancestors. If you wish, you may go forward and gaze upon her. So that's when he sees that it is his Marielle. But who did that slow, sepulchral voice belong to? That's my question.
It's interesting. Could it have even been in like an inner monologue or sort of thing? Or
yeah, and you almost, is this like a sort of Terry Pratchett death type figure there? In my mind, it's Christopher Lee. I don't know why, but
yeah, nice, yeah. If it was Silent Hill, it'd be Pyramid Head.
Pyramid Head. Yeah, when he finds that this is his Lady Marielle, he can't move, he can't even cry out or weep, for my very tears have turned to ice.
Yep.
And that's when we get this idea of this event has separated itself somehow in time. And at length, with an awful effort of will, he turns and leaves the cathedral with steps that were both hurried and leaden, which again is that nice juxtaposition of things.
Yeah.
And it takes him a while to get out of the place even, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's almost like it doesn't want him to leave. Yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, do you think she's almost lured him there and then wants to keep him in that place?
Well, this is what I'm thinking. Like 'cause I can't get that sort of Silent Hill aspect out of my head now. I've figured it, because it's that kind of thing. Like it's like he's almost like he's been lured into the centre, like a spider web.
Yeah,
and he's stuck in his own dark memory kind of thing. And
nice.
Yeah,
nice. I must have roamed for hours in alleys blind and stifling as tombs, and along the tortuous, self-reverting thoroughfares, ere I came to a familiar street and was able to, henceforward, to direct my paces with something of surety. So yeah, blind, stifling, it's still that very claustrophobic feel. But he does eventually find the bridge and crosses to it again and comes to the road that leads him away from that fatal city. Fatal city is nice. Not fateful, fatal.
Yeah.
And then the closing paragraph is, since then I have wandered long and in many places, but never again have I cared to revisit those old world realms of fog and mist, for fear that I should come once more to Malneant and find that its people are still busied with their preparations for the obsequies of the Lady Mariel. So the place has a name as well, which is interesting.
Yes.
Presumably it's kind of on a map somewhere or something. How does...
Yeah.
Has he slipped in like almost like a sort of parallel universe or dimension here or something?
Yeah, this is kind of what I was thinking, with it being like liminal space, and
yeah,
you know, to use the Hodgson term, he's on the borderlands. He's like you were saying with Eric Zahn as well. It's kind of like that's like some kind of annex to the real place that he's kind of slipped into.
Because he's obviously in a real city there, right? He's taken his rooms and there's a landlord. It's all very day to day, isn't it? Apart from that aspect takes it somewhere else.
Yes, yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it's like some kind of Rubicon, some kind of threshold.
Yeah, because then presumably he could find it again if he wanted to. But
yeah. Then
I suppose the question is, if he goes there again, is he going to have the same experience, or is he just going to be walking around a pleasant medieval market town?
Yeah, well, that's like the end of Eric Zahn, isn't it? It's he'd never found the place again. He's wandering around. He's never found it.
There's not even a cathedral there.
Yeah. We're not a city. We've got a little chapel.
So yeah, excellent story, and this is Smith really getting into his stride now.
Yes,
and I think in this one, he really successfully combines both that dreaminess and that sense of loss. Is very poignant and very powerful.
Yeah.
But that loss that was self-inflicted as well.
I like how these two stories have been so completely different, but the one similarity through it all is how vivid it is.
Yeah.
Like his descriptions of the fires and stuff in the first one, and then the descriptions of this mist-enshrouded, dismal, gloomy, gothic city.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you can see it. You can see it. And that's sort of the key to his writing, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, again, within just a few words, he conjures up such vivid descriptions. And we did check as well. I can't find any trace of a real-world Malneant, so we're assuming this is just a Smith invention again, which is a bit of a shame because it'd be nice to visit. Or maybe not.
Well, I assume it's part of his Averoigne district area, you know, which is almost like his Lovecraft country, isn't it? But in medieval France kind of thing. It's his milieu.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
There's a nice little bit here by Ramsey Campbell talking about this story. He says, a night in Malneant, which returns us to Averoigne, is all the more apparent that the kingdom is a landscape of the mind, as darkly romantic as any in Poe. Indeed, the poignant central notion of this parable is at least as potent as the bonds between the ushers and their house.
That's nice. Yeah.
It's nice. Yeah.
And there was just actually two other things I wanted to mention with this. Some of our listeners may remember there was a UK fanzine around in the late 80s called Dagon that was edited by the lovely Cole T. Ford, who's sadly no longer with us. And they published articles and Call of Cthulhu scenarios and various other things.
Right.
And they had in that a scenario that's one of the best Call of Cthulhu scenarios I ever played, which is based very much on this setting.
Ah.
And also is very reminiscent of Last Feast of Harlequin.
Nice.
By Thomas Ligotti.
Yeah.
Which, again, I think ties into this story.
It really does. It's interesting. I hadn't thought of that, but as soon as you mentioned it, It is very similar, isn't
Yes.
it? It's a very similar type of thing.
I think he must have drawn upon this some way. And of course, Ligotti is something. Well, there's going to be a piece on him in this month's Innsmouth News,
right?
Which you can get if you sign up as a Patreon and support our show, of course. Yeah. And I think we're also going to be covering him very shortly on the Innsmouth Book Club podcast.
Yeah, well, that's one I'd like to cover, actually, is Last Feast of Harlequin, because I think it's one of my favourites of his.
So that scenario was called In a City of Bells and Towers, and it was by Mark Morrison. And if you can't get back copies of Dagon now, because they're fairly rare, and I'm not selling mine, it was also part of the Horror on the Orient Express campaign pack, which I believe was quite a big box. It's a little bit like the Masks and Nyarlathotep campaign. It was a global thing.
Yes, it was, yeah.
So it's included in there, and it really is an excellent scenario. I don't really want to say too much about it or spoil it, but the party find themselves in this city and they have various strange encounters as they go through. And there's lots of nice little puns. It's very Ligotti-like.
Nice.
There was one that always stands out to me, and it says, up in the road ahead. No, up in the road ahead. It was full of nice little touches like that. So not a big sort of action scenario, but really atmospheric. And it packed a big punch at the end. I'll say no more than that.
They were often my favourite scenarios then, the more sort of subdued, the ones you can really sort of get into and there's a mystery. I like the mystery aspect.
Yeah.
I think it goes back to my love of Christie and stuff like that. Anything that's got a bit of a whodunit, got a mystery vibe to it, I'm sold,
And that rule system is great for that kind of setting, right? Yeah, it gets you away from the shooting deep ones and throwing dynamite down wells kind of, which is good as well. Everyone like.
It's always good fun, yeah.
We like a bit of a dust up with deep ones every now and again.
Oh, yeah.
As long as we've got guns.
Yeah.
And, so do keep an eye out for that. I don't know, it may be available in other places as well. I don't know, but it really is a superb scenario. And the other thing I just wanted to mention, this I found through Jason Aiken's site, and I'll put a link up in the show notes below. There's a reading which he has posted up on YouTube. It's Fritz Leiber reading this story at the Third World Fantasy Convention in 1977.
Oh, I saw a mention of that somewhere, and I meant to track it down, and I never did. And I completely forgotten about it. Nice one. I need to see that. Nice one. Yeah.
So I'll get that up. And also, while you're there, subscribe to Jason's channel as well, because he goes back through a lot of the old pulp stories and discusses them.
Oh, lovely.
Weird Fiction covers a lot of Robert E. Howard, Lovecraft, and everyone else. So that's on YouTube. He's got a very good channel there. So yeah, we'll get the link up to that below. Other than that, I don't know of any adaptations or...
No.
There's readings, of course.
Yeah.
As I said before, there seems to be very little screen adaptations of Smith.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I mean, there's a grand total of 3. One of which I still can't track down. I still can't track down the final incantation. I think it's a student thing, and it only got shown at a few film festivals, and I guess it didn't get funding or whatever. How things don't pan out.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's Mother of Toads, which was part of the Theatre of Bizarre anthology film, and a episode of Night Gallery of Return of the Sorcerer.
And as Ralph Grasso mentioned, who wrote in and told us that incantation to Sarthogua in The Weird Tailor.
Oh, yes. Yeah, which, The Weird Tailor.
We mentioned a little while back as well. Yeah, so check our earlier episodes. There's a link up to that episode as well on YouTube. Yeah. Was it the Boris Karloff series, I think?
Thriller. Yeah. Yeah, Boris Karloff's Thriller. Yeah.
But I suppose, in a way, with this type of story, the Malneant story, I can see that as a nicely produced, sort of low-budget, short, 20-minute kind of film with tons of atmosphere.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of Lovecraft stuff like that. There's a lot of shorts of Lovecraft short stories that are similar in sort of, like, there's loads of versions of The Hound and things like that.
Yeah, and The Tomb.
And The Tomb and Eric Zahn and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, I don't know why that hasn't been done. I just guess not many people are familiar with it, I guess.
And I suppose in some ways this is almost like a reverse Outsider, right? Because the outsider is the person coming out, and here we've got the person going in.
Yeah.
And they both go out and come in. They both sort of return to their real worlds. at the end. So there we are. 2 stories, quite different in tone in some ways and different in subject matter, but both striking, especially Malneant, I think. Superb story.
Yeah, it's one of my favourites. I really like it.
And we'd like to hear your comments and questions as well. If you do know of any other adaptations, please do let us know. We'd love to hear about those. Or if there's any facts we've got wrong, pronunciations, as we say, not our strong point, but we do our best.
No. Yeah.
And if you do like the show, do check out our Patreon page as well. We value all the support we get, and we want to give a big thanks to our current existing patrons. If you'd like to join them and help the show to grow, then check out the site for details. You get a monthly copy of Innsmouth News, which has articles and news items in it. You get access to bonus content, and there's various other items and goodies you can get as well. And speaking of bonus content, we are planning our first bonus episode for patrons. We're going to be delving into the letters between Smith and Lovecraft and Derleth. That's going to be coming up very soon if it's not out by the time this episode airs. Basically, we're going to choose a couple of letters each and just chat about those.
Yep.
And we've also got a bonus episode coming up on the Innsmouth Book Club as well for our patrons, where we're going to invite you to join us in a live chat in Innsmouth. I think this might be the first time anyone has ever Zoomed from Innsmouth. So
I think it may be. Yeah. First ever Zoom from Innsmouth.
We're not quite sure what to expect, but keep an eye out for details of that. Anything.
Yeah.
All right, so thanks very much for joining us today. Thanks again to our reader, Jeff Goad, who was our guest on the last episode. Do check out the Appendix N podcast. What are we covering next time, Tim?
Next time we'll be doubling up again. We'll be covering the resurrection of the rattlesnake and 13 phantasms.
Excellent. That's a great film title, isn't it?
Isn't it?
13 Phantasms. That should be a film.
Yeah. The resurrection of the rattlesnake almost sounds like like an album by one of the psychobilly lot, doesn't it? You know.
Yes. We, as we said before, if you want band names or album names, then just mine, Clark Ashton Smith.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Thanks again for listening, folks. With that, it's goodbye from me, Rob Poynton.
And it's goodbye from me, Tim Mendes.
You have been listening to Strange Shadows, an Innsmouth Gold production in association with the Innsmouth Book Club. For more information, visit www.innsmouthgold.com, because Innsmouth is not just a place,